Born in Cuba, left a year and a half after Castro took over. Settled in New York, where I grew up, and I stayed there until I came to Boston, really to go to the Harvard Kennedy School. Met my husband, never left, and a year later I was at City Hall after graduating from the Kennedy School, and there began my journey in Boston city government, which was I think, the defining moment of my career. I worked in City Hall for 8 years for Kevin White, first as Chief of Staff and then as Deputy Mayor and Chief of Staff. And from there I came into the private sector, into the communications business, where I have been ever since. It was at a time in the 70s when there was a crusade to save cities. We had riots, we had all sorts of turbulence, particularly in New York, where I had grown up, right? From anti-Vietnam demonstrations to the riots in the streets after Martin Luther King was killed and Bobby Kennedy was killed. So it was in that context that I became incredibly attracted to the whole movement to save cities. So in Boston, we had just had when I joined city government, not only busing, but before busing, the whole crisis with the South End being gentrified and the Inquilinos Boricuas en Acción standing up for themselves, and Kevin White really siding with them and saying, we're not going to let this neighborhood be obliterated. And that was the birth of EVA, which is a proud, proud institution still to this day. In a way, all these issues of human rights and civil rights and women's rights were all coming to the fore. And being a Hispanic woman and a minority, I was keenly aware of that. I remember arriving at City Hall, and it was a white Irish male bastion, and a young, woman in her 20s who was Hispanic and whose name they couldn't pronounce was really quite a cultural affront to the establishment. I found it even more difficult when I went out into the private sector and was in endless meetings where I was the only woman, and hard to navigate. And like so many women of my generation, so many Hispanics of my generation, we learned to develop new instincts of survival and ways of navigating the environment, which have been, frankly, incredibly useful in my career. In my day, we were still trying to blend in to what was there. I think now it's clearly an asset to be bicultural. It's an asset to represent a different point of view. And I think the world is catching up with the power of diversity. It's certainly, I think, an asset to be a Hispanic in Boston today. Now the opportunity is there because you're Hispanic. The world, certainly Boston has changed from a city that really was beginning to try to understand minorities when I came, and where minorities were fighting hard for rights, to a city now that understands that being inclusive is crucial to its economic future. That in order to compete, we've got to be not only inclusive, but we've got to make sure that that talent that is, Hispanic and female and from, and Vietnamese and Asian, et cetera, is tapped and allowed to rise to the top and contribute their full potential to the city. Grow roots here and make this town your own, because it's a great place for opportunity, and Boston's best days are ahead of us.